Good day to all of you. My name is Shuasharp, but you can just call me Shua. And I'm here today to present to you how I create dynamic action scenes. For starters, I would like to clarify that this is not how you should do action scenes. This is simply me sharing what I studied from other webcomics and what I personally learned from creating my own. Each and every artist has their own style and way to represent that in their comics. And the ones that we will be discussing here are not rules you should follow to a T. These are just tools that you can use or info that may help you understand how I make action scenes. So, if you have any thoughts and ideas on the topic, I would love to hear it and learn from you as well. I am here together with all of you to try and share what I have learned in the creation of my webcomic, as well as what I have observed while reading a lot of action manga and comics. So, for starters, what qualifications do I have to do this workshop? I honestly don't have much qualification, but I have created a webcomic called Warp Night, which I am currently remaking and is on a hiatus for around 2 months now. So, if any of you have heard of it, I will return to it soon. Some of my work are also on storyboarding fight scenes for Rule Breaker and The Cloud That Became Rain. My other backgrounds are not exactly art, but in 2D and 3D animation. However, these helped me a lot in my art journey. And here are some of my work. The upper image is from my webcomic, and the lower animation is from a show called Ruby. It's not much, but it's honest work. So also shout out to Monty for inspiring me to animate. So with all that cleared up, we can start. So what is an action scene? An action scene depicts characters engaged in a high stakes physical challenge in order to achieve a goal. This goal can vary from a lifelong mission, like saving a princess, to a simple action, such as punching someone. And this can also vary between one panel or more. But as of now, we will be focusing on a single panel of action scene. Later, maybe we can tackle a bit more on multiple panels. So these are the topics that we will be discussing. There is action pose, which is the pose of your character, special effects, which are debris, speed lines, and more, and perspective, the angle in which the action is drawn, and also paneling, which is the placement of your panels. So let's start with action poses. So the action pose is basically the meat or the main ingredient in the creation of your action scene. This can vary from getting on a fighting stance or attacking someone, blocking an attack, and many more. From what I've learned and observed, action poses have at least three elements that will help you make an impactful, understandable, and easy to follow action pose. The most notable of these components are the following: the line of action, which is an imaginary line that you can draw along the character's pose, the silhouette, the resulting outline or shape of the pose, and the balance and forces, which is the forces exerted to your character or applied by your character. The line of action. So what is the line of action? These are lines that you can draw alongside the pose of your character. A character's body posture flows along this imaginary line of action. You can use this as a guide to start drawing a pose from scratch, but you can also use this to help guide the eyes of the reader. For example, in the image provided, the pose of both the giant and the master swordsman have their own line of action. When trying to sketch this pose, I first started with a line to show the general idea or movement of an action. This may be nothing but a simple line, but it really helps in giving yourself a hint of the action that you want to draw. Next would be the silhouette. So, action scenes have a high tendency to be messy and hard to follow. Thus, it is important to make sure that your action silhouette is easy to understand. So, the silhouette is basically the outline and shape of your character, and making it clean and understandable helps the readers understand the pose quickly. The example shown here is from Razor, from Genshin Impact that I drew a long time ago, and Raven from Teen Titans. So as you can see, the actions that they're doing here are pretty easy to understand, nothing complicated. And next thing would be the balance and forces. So balance is basically just gravity or the lack thereof if they're flying. That's affecting your character or the pose of your character. Well, forces is the force applied to your character and by your character. So there's also like Newton's third law, which is every action has an opposite and equal reaction, which is basically just a response to your attacks or a response by from you by your enemy, kind of like that. Uh, so what else? So, using these three, if you're having a hard time making a post, um, you can always use references to help you um, think of a pose. So why don't we like draw an action pose? So I'm gonna be switching to my tablet now to draw some examples. Okay, so now that I'm on my drawing tablet, we can start drawing poses. So the first one would be the line of action. So the line of action is basically if you don't really have any idea or um, you don't have anything that you can use, or if a sketch doesn't really help you think of a pose, you can always simply use a line of action. For example, you can use this to like depict a kick. Maybe this is the force to show the kick. So the user or the character can be like doing this. Maybe he's looking forward a bit. This is his other hand, kind of like that, and then the feet were here, and then finally the kick. Uh, Maybe it's like a heel kick, I guess. Yeah, some sort of kick. So you're basically just having this starting with the line of action, and then drawing your sketch from there. Does the direction of the line of action does it is it like important? I could say that it's not, but sometimes it can be. Because for example, another example is like, let's say there's like a rocket, like this is a rocket or something, and maybe you don't really have an idea. You want a character to be placed here, but you don't really know what pose they will be doing. Maybe they're dodging or something. So you can use like maybe this one, just a line to show that it's dodging this missile, and then you can draw your pose from there, kind of like this, and you draw the arms, kind of like that, and then the feet, maybe kind of like that. I mean, if you don't really have to follow it at the, it just helps in giving yourself an idea on what to draw or what pose is best for your scene. Kind of like that. So what else for the line of action? Maybe for example, a falling character. Oh, line of action doesn't really have to be like a curve. It can be straight. Just character standing, or maybe an S one. Like maybe they're like reading a book, kind of like this. So yeah, a line of action. You once you've like got a good grasp of your poses, or if you have like a good idea on what you want your characters to do, you don't really have to follow this. But if you're having a hard time thinking of a pose, a simple line could help. So in for example in the previous examples, the character here basically already has a good silhouette. So for example, this one has like a silhouette of a kick, as you can see. So this is the leg, and then the head. Even if you only have the silhouette, you already have an idea on what the character is doing. Maybe you can even make it a little bit better. So, for example, in the silhouette, you can't really see the face or the direction of the face. Maybe you can like fix that, I guess. But basically, silhouette just if you have like a confusing pose that you might want to so that your readers might have a hard time understanding. Maybe the reason why it's confusing is because the silhouette of that pose is a bit hard to understand. Now for the balance and forces. So for balance and forces, basically to, when your character is doing a pose, they usually have to keep their balance so that they wouldn't fall over, or so that they would look, I guess, cooler. So for example, a character can be standing still, but can be standing still, but they might be able to pose in a way that makes them look intimidating. For example, in this case, the character posing is I guess he's a master martial artist. So maybe he's posing confidently like this, or kind of like this. Even standing still is a pose. But the idea is the center of gravity of the character that you are like posing. Center of gravity is mostly in most cases located in the lower abdomen part, or like in the abdomen part. So over here. So as long as this is in line with the foot, it would certainly make your character, the pose of your character, look stable. In other cases, for example, the character is like drawing a sword, or like unsheathing a sword. He might be like leaning forward in a way, kind of like this, like this. This is the sword. The feet the feet has to orient itself with the character leaning forward. This is because the center of gravity that is located here, has also moved forward because of the character like crouching and not crouching, bending his upper body forward, and that makes the rest of the feet also. So as you can see here, maybe it's not located, I guess, that position. So maybe you might want to move your feet back so that it would hit kind of like this. So yeah, you just have to like adjust your pose in a way that would make it look more stable. That's it for the poses. One good way for you to practice poses is to draw one good character, and that really helps you a lot when practicing poses is Spider-Man. His design has like these circle thingies, these grid like web patterns that help it to do poses. Not to mention Spider-Man's character is basically like an acrobat, so you can just give him like very wild poses that you might not be able to do. This character is like a 3D object. Drawing Spider-Man really helps in giving yourself a better understanding of poses. So that's it for balance. Forces, on the other hand, has to is basically like an action reaction thing. So for example, in this example, the action is basically the kick, right? The reaction of this might be if a character is kicked, for example. Let's make another layer for that. Like this character, it's like over here. It's just standing normally like this. If he is kicked in this area, his body has to move back. Has to adjust to the force that's like applied to him, kind of like this. So it's kind of like a chain, where if a chain dangles, let me just erase this. If a chain dangles and then you hit a chain, the part that is hit moves first, and then followed by the rest of the chain. So the rest of the chain is being pulled towards this area. But in a drawing, you can't really see the being pulled part. So you just have to like think that, okay, this the body is pushed here, but the rest is like has the position of like they are being pushed into this direction. And if you want to make it more intense, maybe you can just bend it a little bit more, like this. It's so bent that maybe it's like wrapping around, kind of like that. Right, for the kick as well, when doing a kick, the center of gravity is here, right? But since he's bending it back, it's over here. As you can see, it's not exactly on a stable position. Like because of the imbalance. The imbalance helps in propelling propelling the force to the target as well. The same with this one and this pose. When dodging something, and my characters ends up looking very stiff. How to make it more dynamic? A character looking stiff might be because of a lot of parallel lines. So, for example, this is your character. He's just doing this with the legs like this. So, the reason why this can be boring to some people is because there are a lot of parallel lines. Like this line is parallel to this line is parallel to this line, is parallel to this line. And basically, the pose is just like one big line, right? And, I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be like a characterization. However, if you want to make your character look more confident, dynamic, you can always switch things up. So one of the ways that people do is to change the pose, change the direction of the shoulders and the hips, mostly at the same time. So in this example, if the hips rotate in this direction, the together with the shoulders, it would give your character more ways to pose. So with this sense of rotation, the body would also respond accordingly. So maybe the spine bends this way now. Maybe the head like follows the bend of the spine like this, and the leg here is like doing this, while the other leg is doing this. Maybe this hand here is like doing this, while the other is doing this. Kind of like that. This is basically moving just in this plane, kind of like this. It's just moving on this plane, but of course you can rotate your character like in this plane as well. To and then this plane would also rotate on the other. It's like this and this. So if we draw it on a top view, this would be your shoulders, while this would be your hips. It's like a different kind of rotation. Maybe now he can do like a lot of things. Maybe he's actually walking. One thing I've also noticed is when you do rotate the hips, the highest point of the hips is basically the leg that supports most of the weight. Because if you do keep this straight, and then this leg over here, it seems like he's moving. Feels like he's moving in this direction. Whenever I draw action, it gets stuck in. Feels like it's in 2D, like in Street Fighter. One of the reasons why an action scene is like can be 2D because it mostly is in 2D. You can simply fix that using perspective. We'll be discussing that later. But as an example, this is the character here, and if they're fighting on this line, this is gonna be 2D, right? However, if it's like on the background, if the line is on the background, and then this character is now placed here, now this is more 3D. So yeah, that's just an example. So running and falling pose tips like this. Mostly people use this pose with this leg high up and this leg pushing. These are basically two key frames in animation. I think these two are like the most commonly used because the in betweens here don't really look that good. Yeah, it might look like this, and it doesn't look like they're running. So you can either choose one of the two. You also have to take into consideration rotation as well of the hips and spine. So as I said before, rotation of the hips is like this for running. The reason why they are rotated this way is because of if you like move your hands into this and into this, your like you move your right hand forward and then your left hand back. When running, you also notice that your shoulders move like in this direction. This gives your entire body like a clockwise kind of rotation. It makes your body like move clockwise as well. However, the reason why it's not doing that when running is because this clockwise rotation is being countered by the rotation of the hips, which is moving like in a counterclockwise rotation like this. For a falling pose, it kind of depends as well on what point you are when you're falling. So in general, if you're falling from a high place or something, the first reflex that you usually do is to grab for something. So if you do fall, I guess the first thing that would fall would be like your center of gravity. I think that's one way, unless you're pushing yourself, or if you fell head first. But if you don't want to fall, I guess this is the first thing that's gonna fall, and then the rest is like gonna follow. But your hands would try and grab something, right? So maybe your hands are like doing this, or maybe it's doing this. But if you do move, it's mostly around this center of gravity here. And if you do fall like near the ground, I guess the reflex that most humans do. I'm not sure if you're drawing humans or if you're drawing a god. Maybe they're like a different reaction, but most of them would try and hit the ground with their hands first. I guess if they're falling from a really high place. So yeah, there's that's like one tip that I have for falling poses. But if you do have like a specific pose that you have in mind, you can search online for references. How about getting impact or getting punched on the face? So from what I've learned, getting punched in the face is basically just like or if there's a circle and if you do hit that circle, the circle kind of like makes this bean shape that also can be applied to the face. So this is like the face. If you do get hit in the face, your face would also contort in that manner. You can contort it like maybe just flat out. You do this like normally punch in the face, the eyes would squint like in reflex. Maybe the upper part, the skull is pushed in while the jaw is like got dislocated, I guess. And maybe the spine also like maybe it's like this. If you want it to be a bit gory, that depends also on what level of gore you want to show. But basically, it still follows this bean shape that we saw here. If it's not gory, maybe it's just a simple maybe it's just a simple kind of like this. That depends also on what level of shape you want to follow. Maybe you don't want it to bend like this. Maybe also on what point in which your character is being punched. Example, in this point, he just got hit, right? And his body and his head just moved back while the rest of his body was like in this position. But maybe his head is already moved back. So maybe it's like this, right? So that also depends on point of action where you want or you want to draw that character. Okay, now on to the next slide. So, special effects. If the poses are the meat of the action scene, special effects are basically the seasonings. So, these are what sells your action by making each movement look faster, each impact stronger, and even show a characteristic of your character. So, examples. Uh, so there are a lot of special effects used on webcomic. The ones that I mostly know of are speed lines, debris, interactive effects, and blur. Now, let's start off with speed lines. So speed lines are mostly used to show the speed of an object or its direction. It can also be used to direct the eyes of the user to focus on something. It can be drawn to the foreground, background, or even integrated to the character or object. An example shown here is from Teenage Mercenary by Rakion. The character is moving from one place to another, possibly top to bottom, most probably top to bottom, as you can see by the speed lines. Next would be debris. So debris are mostly small particles in the air, which can be blood, dust, wood, sparks, and many more. The use of this is mostly from like results of a strong action. It can also be used to fill in empty spaces in the background. So an example here is from The Boxer by JH. When the punch landed, I guess a bunch of sweat, drool, maybe a bit of blood was like blown away from that point of impact. And next is the interactive effects. So these are the effects that interact with the character, the environment, or even panels. So this can be explosion, smoke, weapon strikes, and many more. Example here is from Omniscient Reader by Sing and Song and Yumi and Sleepy C, and D&D session that I once had before. So yeah, as example here, there's like an explosion of a character landing and also like sword strikes. Next would be finally blur. So sometimes speed lines aren't enough to show speed. You want it to be so fast, even the camera can track it properly. This is where motion blur comes in. Motion blur can be done through many ways. Some use smearing, some additional lines, or even differences in color. In the example shown above, or on the left, it's still the Boxer by JH, but we the, but it's like the hand. It's like the hand that's shown there. It shows how fast the punch hit and retracted. So another use of blur is also to determine focus. So if you want the reader to focus on the background, then you blur the foreground. So and if you want the character to focus on the foreground, then you blur the background. These effects are just a few of many, and you can also combine these effects to make an even better action scene. You can even hide it in your environment and make it more immersive or realistic. So one a good example of effects being hidden in the environment is rain. Rain can be used to hide speed lines, and shadows can also be used to hide explosions, and there are a lot more creative ways. Let's let's switch to the tablet to show you some examples. The first example that we will be doing is speed lines. Speed lines, for example, there's like a character running, right? So if a character is running, basically has this pose, right? So, okay, so this is the shoulder, and then the rotation of the hips is like the opposite from as what I've said earlier. It's like this, and then this is the other foot, kind of like this, right? I mean, this looks good enough. So in this panel, the character is running. Let's say this is like the horizon line, I guess. So when the character is running, maybe he's coming from like a certain point, which is here. He's running from this point, and you want to make his running look even faster than what you're currently seeing. So maybe you can add speed lines to this. A general rule, a general idea that I follow is to use speed lines that point to either the starting position or the destination of like an impact. For example, since he's starting here, the speed lines would also be pointing here, right? Kind of like this. Another would be like when he's kicking, like in this example. In this example, the kick is basically uh, sideways, right? When dodging, maybe the speed lines are like from the point where you can use to focus on is this one, the missile, or the tip of the missile. So maybe your speed lines is like pointing towards this point here, kind of like that. Yeah, maybe we can adjust the shape to show a better view. Maybe it's like this. Maybe the shape is like this, and then the speed lines are like this. Now it's like a 3D. But yeah, it can either be the source or the destination. In this example here on the kick, the parallel type of speed lines. So from what I've noticed, parallel speed lines basically denotes like a 2D representation of a movement. So if it's like moving really really fast in a 2D space, then you can use this. If it's 3D, for example, in this one, it's moving in like in a three-dimensional manner. So it's moving from like down, just here, right, which is here, and also away from the camera, which is like I guess over there. But aside from speed lines, though, of course, you can use other forms of effects to denote speed, which is the blur, for example. The other example that we also showed was debris. So debris is basically can be blood. It can also be dust, wood, sparks. What debris can do is to fill in empty spaces. So for example, we have like you just have a silhouette here, right? Let's this is like a robed figure with like swords in his back, maybe a great sword over here, right? I think that's good enough. Let's let's like add a circle for an eye. I mean, this can already be good enough, I guess. As a pose, the silhouette is clear. The It kind of gives off an ominous kind of vibe, but it can also be improved through as what I said, debris. So debris can fill in empty spaces that can enhance a scene. So like if we do add debris here, it seems like the air is unsettled by this character. Maybe even have like particles coming off that character, like some sort of aura, in a way. Debris can help in setting the mood as well, and also to fill in empty spaces that might be a bit boring for other characters. So yeah, that's also one use of debris. And the next would be the interactive effects. So interactive effects are basically effects that can interact with your environment, as I said before. Um, so like explosions, right? So one um, a concept that an idea that I was able to observe from other artists was if an explosion happens, there's basically like force being pushed in all sorts of directions, right? However, let's say there's a missile hitting like this, I guess, mountain. Since the force is coming in from this direction, most of the explosion would be coming into this direction. Makes kind of like creates this type of explosion. The reason being is because when you put force in this direction, the ground also puts, since the ground is applying force in this way, kind of like most of the explosion move in this direction. And so this is like the strongest part of the explosion, followed by this. And don't forget that there can also be like slight, I mean, a bit smaller, but an explosion still. There's like smaller forces also being um, dissipated in this direction. So another interactive effect is like sword strikes, right? So for example, in sword strikes, let's say you're cutting a tree. So in this case, let's draw this pose, I guess, when cutting a tree. So there's like a close up shot. I guess you can just, and then there's like a sword, right? Like that. Oh, maybe the sword is like this. And then this is the tree. The pose itself is basically just this guy doing with the sword like positioned at his back. However, the effect here, special effect here, which is basically the smearing of the sword, gives him a sense of movement. Like it gives him that like emotion where he's actually cutting the tree. It can also be just you know the sword is here, maybe it's like this kind of thing. Maybe not even having anything. Maybe it's just this. Maybe the breeze, I guess, that's coming from the tree towards the sword. Maybe some slight smearing on the sword. So yeah, that's like one way of using interactive effects as well. So like the debris it's like coming off from the wood, and also the smearing of the sword. So what else? You can also hide, for example, explosions. You can hide it through like shadows. So if let's say we have a blank canvas here, and then there's like a guy with a gun like, doing this. I guess yeah, this I guess this is a gun. He's like looking to the side, right? But you can use shadows here, kind of like that. Maybe the in here, the shadow of the gun, the shadow of the hand, kind of like this, the shadow of the arm, the shadow of this part of the arm. Maybe yeah, kind of like this. The rest of the body, the shadow of the leg. Maybe the shadow that you are applying to the trench. You can also take that into account. And you can also enhance this also with speed lines as well. So kind of like this, maybe it's so yeah, you can also enhance this with speed lines, of course. Kind of like this. I guess you can just shade the entire trench because it's so bright. Kind of like that. It doesn't now it doesn't look like a trench, but you get the point. You get the idea. You can use shadows just to show the effects of the explosion. What else? Finally, blur. So, in the cases of blur, it can be used multiple ways. One is through motion blur. The other is just to show focus on the character. So, for example, let's say there's a warrior over here holding a yeah, just holding a sword, basically, and a shield. The neck, and this is his opponent. Just a silhouette of a person holding two swords, like this, right? So you can use blur to like, so for example, in this case, in this panel, you might want to have the user focus on the foreground. So you just have to blur the background on this blur, Gaussian blur, and yeah, like that. That should be enough. So with the background blurred out, you might focus more on the foreground. Another, if you also wanted to focus on the background, you just blur the foreground. So filter, blur, kind of like this. So like this, the foreground is now blurred out, and then the user is now, the reader is now focusing on the background. And this one, in this example over here. So in this example, you might want to use like blur, kind of like kind of like this, or make your run much faster. So there's also like how do you show violence, right? So what I've learned, I guess, not exactly to show violence like as it is, like what the standard is for the Webtoon police, but as a general rule that I follow, you don't really show the violence or the gore. You just imply to it as gore. For example, you can't really say that this is blood. This is basically a shadow. It looks like blood. You can see it as blood, but it's not the same color as blood. Nor is it. Yeah. Basically that you can imply that there is violence, but you don't show the violence. So if you really want to be creative, or if you really want to be like fourth wall breaking, these effects or poses interact with the paneling. So, for example, in this case, it's like you're kicking, right? This character, it might even break the panel, kind of like this. So that's like one of the cool ways to use paneling as well. So yeah, that's it. And now back to the presentation. So now with our meat seasoned and cooked, we now have to plate it properly. So shot angles and perspectives is basically how you present your action to your readers. This can either enhance the intensity of a scene or tone it down, depending on what you want to achieve. But before we delve deep into perspective, we have to take into consideration the camera shot uh, of the panel or of the scene. So there are mainly three types of shots that are used in films and comics. One is like close-up shot, which is a shot taken of a person or an object at a close range. There's also the medium shot or the waist shot, that is like a shot captured at a medium distance from the subject. And finally, the long shot or wide shot. It's a shot that shows the full length of a subject while also including a large amount of the surroundings and also the film setting. So, a close-up shot. So, close-up shots are mostly used to show minute detail that would be hard to capture in a medium or long shot. Examples of this are emotions, certain motifs that you want your readers to notice, or anticipation of an attack. So, the examples shown here are from The Boxer by JH and also Warp Knight. In here, basically, it's just an anticipation of an attack, but on JH, it can also be interpreted as yeah. In my example, it's like warp emotion, right? But in JH, it can also be used as an anticipation for an attack. So another famous example also is it's like when you're throwing a punch, you're pulling your hand back. That kind of shot or that kind of scene, like you pulling your hand back, a close-up shot on that scene helps in showing your emotion when you're throwing the punch, or and even the motif of your hand being pulled back to throw the punch. And next would be the medium shot or waist shot. So the medium shot is mostly used for showing exchanges of blows. This is mainly due to its comfortable distance from the camera, which shows the body language of the character and a clear shot of their action. So as and the examples shown here, this is from again my Warp Knight comic before the remake, and The God of High School by Young J Park. So this is the shot that's mostly used in action comics. The reason being is because you can the body language is clear, your movement is clear to the readers, and so on. And finally, for the shot is the long shot. So the long shot is basically it can often be times called as an establishing shot. This shows the setting and relative position of the characters, an outside view of the fight, and it can also be used for long action takes, which is basically your character leaving after images similar to keyframes in animation. So if you have the opportunity to do this shot, you can maybe use it to show the environment, but you can also use it to flex your long camera shots. Um, I think this is used a lot in webcomics such as um, The God of High School. It's been used a lot in The God of High School, and also um, solo leveling if you've heard of it. So that's it for the camera shots, and the next thing would be the perspective. So there are multiple perspectives to use in showing an action scene. The way you use perspectives will make your action scenes either static or dynamic. In most cases, the bird's eye view and worm's eye view will make your action scene more dynamic, while the eye level make your action scenes more static. The first person view, on the other hand, depends really on what that person is looking at. Since we are focusing on dynamic action scenes, then we might only be doing bird's eye view and worm's eye view. In making such perspective, we need to. These are the two components that I mostly use. So first is the horizon line. This is basically the line that indicates the ground on which your character is standing. The rest of your drawings will also be relative to this horizon line. So if it's slanted, the whole world will also be slanted. So the example located in this slide is basically a drawing of me, a drawing of Ruby Rose by me. That's skydiving. So this is the bird's eye view. So a view from above, and it's also like one thing that I've noticed also on a bird's eye view is that the the horizon line is located way above your character's eye level. So it in the bird's eye view, the background would mostly be the ground. Thus, it can be established. Thus, it can establish the position of your characters to the world they live in. It can also be used to make the character look small or insignificant relative to its surroundings. Uh, Next would be the worm's eye view. So basically, a view from below. The horizon line here is located way below your character's eye level. And in the worm's eye view, most of the background here is the sky. So um, you will be looking at the subject in a I guess a higher plane. It makes them look tall, strong, or mighty. So in the examples here, this is like a concept art. While I was still conceptualizing Warp Night. So the monster here is shown in like a bird's eye, in a worm's eye view, which makes them look like I guess more intimidating. Okay, so with that in mind, let's talk about the vanishing point. So the vanishing point is basically the idea that the farther an object is from the camera, the smaller they get. And if they get and if they get further and further away, they will be nothing more than a point. Hence, vanishing point. So an example is in this. Uh, an example would be like this old commission by me. The green lines indicate the plane of the ground. The red line indicates the horizon line, while the blue circle indicates the vanishing point. So using a vanishing point, if your character looks really big while in that vanishing point, that just means that they're really big. And you can also use this to like orient your character. If you're having a hard time, yes, also forgot to mention that uh, vanishing points is really useful in determining distance from the camera and the relative size of things. So in general, vanishing points are located in the horizon line, but in some cases, mostly in two cases, there is a vanishing point at the center of the sky or at the lowest part of the earth or center of the earth. These special vanishing points can help you draw skyscrapers or cliffs that point directly up or down. The further the distance between the upper vanishing point and lower vanishing point, the more parallel your buildings will look. If both upper and lower vanishing points are close, they can create some sort of fisheye effect on perspective. And if you're having a hard time thinking of or using perspective, you can of course use references as well. So for an example, this is like the horizon line. So let's color it as red. This is the horizon line, and you have like set up two vanishing points here. So if you draw your character, if you like draw a square, your square might look like this here, here, like that, right? And mostly like this. If it's closer here, it might look like this. And yeah, the closer it gets, it would look like this. I mean, it can also be placed here as well. Like it's gonna be placed here, then I guess here with this like that, right? But basically, this is like what you use as a reference. So if let's say you're drawing a character over here, you also have to use these vanishing points as a reference. For example, maybe your character is like this, right? The character is like standing sideways, kind of like this. So maybe the feet is point this way, this way. Maybe the hands in the pocket, make it look cooler. But it's basically this, and as you can see, there's like this is like parallel to each other. The reason being is that the special vanishing points that I mentioned on the upper part is like very very high up, and the lower part, the vanishing point in the lower part is very very far down. So since it's really really far away, I don't know. In a bird's eye view, you might notice like the horizon line like really really above the eye level, right? Really above the panel. Oh, no, and you also can notice now the lower vanishing point, the one like at the center of the earth. So for example, let's say there's like a vanishing point here. It's like maybe a road, maybe, and there's another vanishing point over here, maybe another road. Not exactly roads, but let's just say roads. Now, if you're drawing, if you're gonna draw a building, you can just use this. But you don't. But a better way is to use this as a reference as well. So from this, maybe you can start a line, start pointing to the location like that, and then here, then here also as well, another one here, and then another one here. Same goes for like another building right here, kind of like that, right? And the more buildings you make, maybe you'll get a better grasp of the vanishing point on the bottom. Let's say it's here, maybe the building is like you place a building here, might overlap a bit with the road was designed, kind of like that, right? And if you make another building here, maybe it's like this, since it's pointing this way, not pointing this way, and this one's like maybe pointing this way, and this way, right? Kind of like that. Now, if you draw your character in this, like, let's say a giant robot or something, like, this is like a giant robot. You can't really draw your character like this because it kind of looks weird. You have to orient it also with this, the center of the earth. So now, if you put my character here, the head must be, if the character is standing in this location, the head must be like here, right? Because it's in line with the feet. So if I draw my character now, kind of looks like this. You can practice foreshortening also. I mean, the knowledge of foreshortening also helps in this kinds of perspective. So maybe kind of like this. Yeah, this is a robot. This is the antenna, I guess. This is the eyes. Maybe it's overlap, kind of like this. Maybe he's holding like a giant sword or something. Yeah, not to mention buildings. Just draw more buildings to establish the vanishing point even more. Kind of like that, and then just like that. Yeah, basically that. That's like one example. If let's say there's like a cliff over a huge cliff over here, okay, like a large hole, kind of like that. You can, of of course, use this as a reference. Like, oh, this is like the inside of the building. People are like, right. And then the cliff would be this part. You can just add like a black hole or something. Maybe some shadow, I guess. Maybe some cars over here. Yeah, this basically it for bird's eye view. Now for the worm's eye view. Okay. For the worm's eye view, the horizon line is maybe located down here below. And let's say there's like two vanishing points here, and also you can now, instead of the vanishing point at the center of the earth, It's not at the center of the sky. So when you're drawing like skyscrapers or something, now the you have to use this as a reference. So, example, this one here, maybe just this line, and then also kind of like this, kind of like this, and like this, like this, like this, like this, like this, this for the skyscrapers. If you're gonna draw a person, you also have to orient them here. So, example, if like there's a person over here that's like looking down, their entire, I mean, I guess the foreshortening rule, it's like this, right? Maybe they're like, it is their foot or something. Yeah, this is what I've noticed also on like pictures drawn, pictures taken from the ground, is that the ground kind of like warps. Like if this is your horizon line, this is the upper and this is the lower. As you can see, it's very very close. If it's farther away, the buildings are gonna look parallel. But if it's very close, kind of like warps the image and make like a fisheye effect. Also, this these upper and lower kind of like creates like a bend instead of like a straight line towards the horizon line. Kind of like bends, kind of like creates some sort of, I guess, magnetic field. Yeah, kind of like a magnetic field. Kind of like that kind of shape. But if I do draw some buildings here, it would also look bent, I guess. Alright, you also have to take into consideration this, the vanishing points on the horizon line. For example, on this one, maybe this, and this one here, here, maybe. Oh, maybe this is a bit too close. Okay, let's just make this building here. Now it's this one, and then this one here, and then this one here. Now, let's say on the ground, it's gonna be like this as well. And if let's say there's a fisherman here, like rowing a boat, his head would like orient on this part, while his body and boat would orient on this vanishing point. So if it's like that, like there's a fisherman rowing his boat, I guess the thing would get bent as well. The boat would also bend, I guess, in that direction, and would point towards the side vanishing points. But kind of like a fish lens, right? And that's what I've noticed, and that's what I've learned. If it's like too close to each other, but yeah, that's for perspective. If you're having a hard time with this, of course you can just follow. You can of course follow references to improve. So next would be finally vertical comic paneling. So a lot of you has asked for this. I'll be discussing it here. If with special effects, poses, and perspective taken into account, the food has been plated properly, and a food's like plated properly might be good, but it can certainly be better through the use of timing. So you can offer up your panels in a similar way waiters bring in like appetizers, main course, or desserts, right? So okay, next, vertical comics. It's like it's a bit tricky to do, I guess, but it follows the same way as traditional comics do. So vertical comics is similar to traditional comics in more ways than one. The art, paneling, speech bubbles, effects, and many more are mostly the same. The flow of events, panels, and how each of them are shown are the same as well. However, the differences in their way to read gives both mediums kind of a different experience. So, webcomics mostly use vertical movement for the readers. This means that placement of panels has to take this into consideration. Showing panels at the right time can also enhance your scene. So, in traditional comics, you can already see this being used, this concept of like showing panels at the right time. A flip the next page is one way to control what panels to give the readers. In traditional comics, this can be used to hide critical information for a suspenseful two-page spread on the next page flip. The same way can also be applied in vertical comics, but unlike a page flip, it might just mean a huge space when scrolling down. Hence, spacing is timing. Proper spacing of panels is important. Webcomics control timing through spacing. A fight scene that is happening quickly can have spaces very close to each other, or even on top of each other. This is to show that a lot of things are happening at the same time. On the other hand, a fight scene that is currently settling down the dust after an explosion may use huge spaces between panels to give a sense of time to the readers. Giving it also gives the readers some time to process the previous panels, while also a following giving the following panels a more impactful reveal. In the example shown here, I usually use left, right, down to place my panels and guide the eyes of the readers. If you do follow like a manga format, like left to right, down, manga also uses that as well, and you can use that too. In the example shown here, I started from like the upper left panel, which is just a guy running towards the church, and then the second panel, which is he's trying to climb up, and third panel, which is a few speech bubbles followed by the third panel, which is him talking about like some event, and finally the last panel, which is just the person that he is talking to. In guiding the eyes of the user through like the use of panel placement, uh, it helps in which info they're gonna digest first. I've also learned that bubbles can also be used to guide the eye. Just make sure that the speech bubbles and panels are not contradicting each other in terms of guidance. So if you're having a hard time placing your panels, you can practice the story during the storyboarding phase. And once you have a good grasp of this idea, your comics will be much easier to read for the viewers. So aside from guiding the reader through placement of panels, we also have to make sure that the readers have a good grasp on on the position of the characters. So in a fight, the position of a character can change from one place to another. This might get quite confusing to read, especially when characters are thrown and people get blown away. So it's even harder if like the characters kind of look similar to one another. So a general idea that they follow is to keep a character on one side of the comic while keeping another character on the other side. Just like when characters talk on film, the side that they are on can determine which character switch even if you show their backside to the camera. If they ever are going to switch sides, there must be a panel or a series of panels to show that they are switching places. In the example shown here, Luna, the one holding a great sword, is on the right, while Patch, the child, is on the left. Now, on the next panel, a monster appears and is drawn on the left side of Patch. When the monster attacks, it is attacking towards the right, which is the location of Patch. And where does Patch run? He runs to the right where Luna was. So I used basically the general idea that I told before, but I used it on like three characters: Luna, Patch, and the monster. So you can use this to like enhance your reading, the reader's experience, while also I guess making your story, I guess, more understandable. However, yeah, you can use a lot of things that maybe you can pick up also when watching films as well. And okay, let's try and create another example of that in our canvas. In comics mostly, they usually just place their panels are like drawn like this, right? On comics and traditional comics, and the way that readers read it, on Western comics is from this to this to this, and then to this final panel. While like on Webtoon, it might be a little bit different, but similar concept. However, it's gonna be this to this to this to this, kind of like that, but with like huge spacing. It doesn't really have to follow this kind of panels, but it helps in like giving the readers a better time to understand your comics. Because one mistake that people usually do is um I mean, there's like an advantage of or disadvantage of both, right? Like for example, in this long vertical comic, if you do try to publish it into a book, you're gonna have to edit this to look like this. There's like an extra step if you want to publish it. And another disadvantage of this is that it doesn't really some I mean most of these panels are already look good if like converted to this. You just have to like concatenate another page on the at the bottom. But if you but maybe you can also improve it through spacing as well. So yeah, there's advantages and disadvantages of both. However, some people that I do like some people kind of like have a hard time transitioning because maybe their panels kind of look like this, right? So if the panels are like this, the readers are mostly start from here, up here, down here, and like this, right? This works with traditional. However, if this is used on vertical, okay, let's move this here. I guess make this a bit smaller. But on vertical, it might be a little bit weird. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but if you do put it in vertical like this, since the main movement of the user of the app or the reader is to scroll down, they might not be comfortable with this movement, this movement from here to this part. Right? So if this is like the normal movement, these movement here of the eye might be okay, but they might not be as comfortable when doing this progression in panels. So one way you can do this is just basically just placement. So this one will be moved here below. Over this two might be like this, right? Or like this. If you want it, if you want to like make it smoother, make the transition smoother. But it would still follow um the same movement, which is from here to here to here to here, right? So that's what I've generally noticed on some comics. that's like uses the traditional, and when switching to like a vertical format will have a hard time on. Yeah, that's like one reason. I mean, this is already good enough. This is already good. This, but it can still be better. And then next would be the character placement, right? So, for example, a character being pushed to a flight of stairs. That's like classic. So, let's make like this. Let's say this is a panel, right? I'm just gonna zoom in. Sorry if it's gonna be pixelated, but let's start with this panel. Okay, the character here is being pushed, right? So this is the hand. This is the character being pushed to a flight of stairs. But this state is the feet, right? And then this is the flight of stairs. We now have like the first panel. The second panel might be like the character looking back, right? Kind of like that, right? And then finally, the last panel would be the character falling like this, on the flight of stairs, basically this. So if we do put that in like in a vertical format, this would be like, I guess, the first line, the first one at the very top, followed by this. I guess it's a bit warped, but and then finally this, right? Now, to take into consideration character placement, we have to consider some things, the character placement of previous frames. For example, in here, let's color this character blue. No, just this one. Since we don't really know who this character is, the character at the bottom. We don't really know who he is. Is he character number one or character number two? We don't really know. So that's like one of the problems if you don't really have a proper character placement. But if you do, you can make it a little bit better. For example, the character one over here. Character one is on the left of character two. So let's just color this, I guess. On the background. Character one is like on the left of character two. Character two is blue. Okay, blue. Like this. Now, let's say this is character two. On placement alone, how do you think are we gonna improve? Are you gonna think that's like determine which character is which? So one is like of course the eye direction. So since this character is looking at the left, you thinking, oh, okay, I guess it's this character because the one on the left is obviously the red character, right? So if let's say this character is pointing this, if the eyes is like pointing in this direction, then you might think, okay, this maybe it's this character now because he's pushing the one to the right, which is this character. So, however, eyes alone aren't like enough. Now if it's this, then I don't know what character it is. But so let's say following this, maybe because if you do use the eyes alone, it might be a bit confusing because maybe it's this character, but he's just like not he doesn't really like he's hesitant to take responsibility of like the push, right? So character placement helps a lot on this. So if you do move your character a bit to the right, yeah, just a bit to the right, maybe even the panel, if you move the panel a bit to the right, then for sure you will know that it's this character that's being that this character now is the one uh, that this character is now this. And then to enhance that, maybe in this scene below, you can keep the character in blue on the right, while keeping the pushing character on the left, like this. Okay, so he's still pushing, kind of like that, right? So if we do go back to coloring it, maybe look like this. Yeah, basically just the placement alone is can be helpful. It can enhance. It doesn't really have to be just that. It can also enhance the character, or the in determining which character is which. I mean, design already can determine which character is which. Like that's what character design. That's what the purpose of character design is, to make them look iconic, even if you just saw a glimpse of it. But positioning also helps. That, that's all there is to the presentation. There is a contest by Webtoon to showcase your skills in making action scenes. So do check it out, and I hope you learned something from all my ramblings. And thank you also for listening and tuning right in this workshop. So if you have any further questions or clarifications, you can put it on the. You can contact me on any of my socials displayed on the screen. Uh, is it being displayed? Oh, not yet. So you can contact me in any of my socials displayed. And I mostly use Twitter these days, but feel free to ask me anything. Thank you to Webtoon and Webtoon Canvas for giving me this opportunity. Thank you also to Lux for helping and letting me join in this workshop. And once again, thank you also for watching. Thank you for watching this video as well. Goodbye.